This is a message that's very personal to me because when I first got a chance to teach this message some months ago, 5 months to be exact, I was walking through it, and I had no idea the gravity of what it was that God was having me to talk about at the time. One of the events that was going on was one of my uncles that I was really close to had just passed, and we were heading to Arkansas to go for his wake and for his funeral. We left on a Friday and got there in time for his wake. His funeral was on a Saturday. And the other event I'll explain to you guys in more detail, which will give you an understanding about me and my wife, a little bit of our history, without me going on and giving you a history lesson. So tonight's message is called Hello Hurricane. Hello Hurricane. And it may sound strange. Hurricane was mentioned only a couple times in the Bible, and you think of the moments when it was mentioned. It didn't seem like it was anything that was huge, any huge moments to be worthy of preaching about. But I want to talk about the seasons that bring on said hurricanes, catastrophes. The wisest man who ever walked on the face of the earth outside of Jesus, we know him as King Solomon. He said in Ecclesiastes 3:1, he made this, he started it out saying, to everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. Now, English 101, you go back to 10th grade, 9th grade, or if you're in homeschool, doesn't even matter what grade. You remember learning that thing is in that group, person, place, or thing, right? Noun. It's a noun. Thing, everything is a noun, person, place, or thing. So everything has a season. And I thought about that, and I'm like, man, well, when I start thinking about inanimate objects, well, do rocks have a season? It's a thing, right? Person, place, or thing. And then, and I got this thought in my head, and I'll just call it the Holy Spirit because I don't think that grand. But I thought about those 5 smooth stones that were in the brook. And at creation, when they were created, there were ages that passed. There were ages and generations that passed until they got called up to the big leagues. That these rocks that may not have started out as simple pebbles, which I'm pretty sure they didn't, started out as something that was whole. And then here they are, water erosion goes and it grows and it wears them down. And now you have 5 smooth stones in a brook. And you might say, well, what's the big deal about 5 smooth stones? Well, to David, it was a huge deal. Because when he pulled those 5 smooth stones out of the water that are inanimate, that have no life to them, they became a life-changing event in his life. So to everything, there is a season. Think about it. The year starts out, we have the first quarter. So in business, we know that there are 4 quarters. And in our Gregorian calendar, we know that there are 4 seasons that normally span the amount of 3 months apiece. So the year starts out, and we immediately start out in winter. And that was another thing that I couldn't really grasp until God began to break this down to me to help me understand. Because to me, it's a new year. Let's spring into a new year, right? Right? That's what you would think. But you come into a new year and everything's dead. Everything's dead. Trees are bare. Grass is dormant. It's not doing anything, which is cool if you mow your own yard. I mow my own yard from time to time. We have some twins next door, and they, it's summertime. They ain't got nothing to do. So the year starts out, and it's wintertime, and everything's white. And for some people, that's their favorite holiday because it's their favorite season because they get a chance to cuddle up and get some soup and get some tomato basil soup with some, grilled cheese sandwich, and you're just sitting in there. I made somebody hungry tonight. But it's great. You're bundled up, you're in. And then comes the spring season, and everything's green again, and it's bright again, and it's fresh, and the air just smells amazing. And then if you're in Texas, there's only one season that you really know, and that's summertime. This summer has been very unique, to say the least. Thank God for all the rain from the deficit that our aquifers and our lakes and our tributaries, that they're super down. But I'm so grateful for the cool weather and all the rain that's coming. And then comes fall. And fall and a lot of fall is my favorite. Fall is my absolute favorite season. And fall just happens to be what's considered harvest time. That's the harvest season. Even though some crops harvest in summertime, fall is known as the harvest season, the great harvest. Now, how do hurricanes come into this? I asked a question in my spirit, and I didn't really understand. There are a lot of things I don't understand. I don't understand why cockroaches. I don't understand why flies. There's just things that I don't understand that I'm not going to waste my breath in the first 10,000 years asking God, why cockroaches? I'm going to wait until 50,000 years and then just be like, Jesus, what's the deal? But I asked the question of why these catastrophes that insurance companies call acts of God. Now, I've heard many broken hearts. I've seen many people after losing a loved one who are really distraught, and they're dealing, and their coping mechanism is immediately, everything is for a reason. And they give this canned response that's supposed to soothe, when in actuality, it irritates me. Because if you're going to blame it on God, that all things work together, that it's all good, God has a plan, once one door closes, another one opens, then I have an issue with God because I don't understand why. I'm still stuck at why. So your response of, it's God's reason, it's not enough for me. So it sent me to studying the Word. I'm a nerd. I'm a Bible nerd. I love information. History is one of my favorite. I love the Levitical law. It all just opens up. It opens up the gospel to me. If there are any other nerds out there, power to the nerd. My wife's a nerd too. She's more of a nerd than me. Bless her heart. So I began to look it up, and I was trying to understand. So in winter, this first season that our year bursts out with, we know that there are some catastrophes that could happen, but one of the worst catastrophes, if you are a farmer, if you're someone who places seed in the ground, you know that the worst catastrophe that could happen is frost hits your garden, it hits your crops, and you didn't get a chance to prepare. Whether it's that first frost or it's the next frost that comes. And it comes in, and you're scrambling around, and you're trying to make sure that the soil isn't too hard, and that now the roots aren't going to be able to do anything. So you're out there trying to break up the fallow ground around so that the crops can still live and that they can produce in that environment. To a lot of people, this isn't a big deal. But let me tell you why it's a catastrophe in Dallas. It's because ice gets on the ground. We're not Minnesotans. We're not Chicagoans. We're not people from the great north. We're people down south that get ice cold water that hits the ground and makes black ice. And if y'all want to make fun of us, you can make fun of us all you want to, but you try to drive 70 on a sheet of ice. That's a catastrophe. And that's something that nobody wants to deal with. And that's the reason why school is cut short whenever it starts icing outside and not snowing, because the struggle is real. Spring comes along, and we're like, well, spring is beautiful. Well, May flowers, or May showers means April flowers, however that works. April showers means May flowers. But it also means lightning storms in the DFW. Y'all know about those lightning storms. See, growing up, I should have prefaced with this. I'm from Arkansas, so if I give you a lot of dirt talk of being on forums and stuff, that's how I spent my summers. was that I was helping my uncle to plant beans and to plant okra and to plant greens and all those things. I was out there doing field work as a kid, so I understand those things. But when springtime comes, those lightning storms, they're hitting and everybody's ducking, trying to hurry up and get in the house. The last lightning storm, I was in my office and a couple of people down the hallway from me, they saw I'm in a summit building, and right there on the golf course on the lake, the lightning was hitting the lake. It's real. There's real danger that happens. There are trees that get hit that land on houses. It's real. And then the tornadoes come. Same thing, springtime. We know what to expect in springtime, right? But then there's one catastrophe that happens year in and year out that's so great, that's so harsh, that it spans 2 seasons, and that's hurricanes. Now, a lot of you in here remember Hurricane Katrina. Those of you who may be online that are in the up north, remember Sandy, just 2 years ago. And this, whether you're on the Gulf Coast or you're on the Atlantic coastline, you know the dangers that come with a hurricane. So hurricanes, they cause so much devastation, but why? I wanted to know why. He began to teach me that frost, those of you who have certain winter crops, you love the frost because the frost means more water. It means that the soil now has water in there, and all you have to do is get out there and break it up. If you plant greens, you love frost. You love that first frost because greens can still be harvested in that time. But you know what the frost does? It kills the beetles. It kills disease that's still lingering on your crops. So that catastrophe is necessary. Springtime comes and the lightning storms are hitting all over the DFW and we're ducking for cover and everything's shaking, the thunder is going. But with all the pollutants in the air, what that lightning storm is doing is it's charging the air, recharging the air, and getting pollutants out of the way. All the chemical imbalance that's going on, you know, the nitrogen, oxygen, all that's in the air, it resets the balance. You go outside after a lightning storm, smells like you're at the beach, right? Smells amazing because it's resetting everything. And here's the beautiful thing about tornadoes. Jack my world up. Tornado Alley. We're in Tornado Alley. Tornado comes through, and there are plants, there's vegetation that have pollen available, that when that tornado comes through, it takes that pollen and it pulls it and it moves it into places and regions that don't have that plant life and that vegetation, and it plants there. It puts pollen there. It populates there to make sure that greenery is spread all about the United States. So we need it. Hurricanes. We're like, there's no way hurricanes could be good. When a tropical depression, when a hurricane makes its way and hits a coast and hammers it and beats down on it and it begins to come inland, the Gulf Coast loves it because afterwards, that inland rain goes and hits all the crops, all the ground, the vegetation, the aquifers, the lakes, the rivers, and it creates rain. See, we've been seeing these uncharacteristic patterns that's been going on, but there's been all these tropical depressions that's been rolling up from the Pacific coast, that's been rolling up from the Atlantic. But we don't understand where our rains and all these things come from because the catastrophe is for your harvest. Everything that you don't want to happen is necessary to happen for your harvest. Nothing is lost. Now, this still sounds like it could be unnecessary, but I want you guys to understand what we're talking about tonight when I talk about hurricanes. I mentioned to you before where this when I first talked about this message, when I first taught this message, I was being taught, and it was a very difficult time in our lives, my wife and I life. We first of all we were enjoying ourselves before this hurricane hit us smack dab in the face. We were maybe about, I'd say 8-9 months into our marriage, in our first year of marriage, and we had just had the talks about, okay, we're gonna, we're ready. We're gonna go ahead and extend our family. We're gonna go ahead and do this thing. Are we sure that we're ready to do this? But let's do it. Let's go ahead. And I remember the day. I remember the moment when I was in my office and I'm doing some work online, and I see my wife at the door, and I'm just thinking she's lingering, and she looks at me and she says, "Hey, Daddy." And I completely didn't even get it, thinking it's a euphemism. And she says, "You're going to be a daddy." And I'm like, "No, wait, quit playing. Stop playing. Quit playing." And she shows me, and it was the most amazing experience in my life that there's no way I could duplicate that. That was February 8th, 2014. Not even a week later, Wednesday, I was in a service, and I got a phone call from my mom, who doesn't call on Wednesdays because she's in church in Arkansas. "Hey, Mama." And she said that my uncle died. He had been in a hospital in ICU, I believe, for the last several days of his life. He had been battling cancer, and this was the day that he would transition on, and that his fight would end on this side. He would triumph in heaven. And so I went out and I took that, and so we knew that, a couple days later we were going to have to go. We were going to make our trip to Arkansas, and there was no problem seeing family and whatnot. And then Thursday I get the call again from my mom. She's talking to me, just I'm concerned about how she's doing. This was the brother that was right above her. And she's doing okay, and she said they wanted to know, my pastor wanted to know if you would minister on the Sunday since you'll be in town. And so I said, yeah, everything feels all right. And, I asked Casey, made sure she didn't have an issue with it, and everything was fine. And then God embedded this in my spirit about the seed. In the beginning, when God created any and everything, He spoke it into existence. He said, "Let there be." That's his catchphrase. If you're going to hashtag God, just say #let there be. That's God. Let there be light. Let there be vegetation. Let there be light in the heavens in the daytime and in the nighttime. Let there be trees. Let there be animals who crawl, animals who fly, animals who swim. Let there be. Let us make man in our own image, in our own likeness. And He said, let there be, let there be, let us. All these things that He did in order to create, using His mouth. And then He turned around, and with man, even though He had already created our spirit, He had already created the soul of man, He turned around and He made the body of man with His hands. And He made this declaration that began to make sense to me in the scope of a harvest. He said, "Here is what I desire for you to do. When I plant you into the earth, I desire that you be fruitful, that you multiply, that you subdue the earth, and that you have dominion." Now, I don't know if any of you guys have ever gotten a weed in your yard. But if you have, you've never just had one weed. Because you know what it does? It's fruitful. It multiplies. And it will subdue your yard if you don't come up against it. So every life is a seed. And I begin to see this thing from a God perspective, that every life is a seed. And I stood up at my uncle's funeral to understand that his life was a seed. Just as anybody who's lost anyone in this room, their life was a seed. Now, what matters after they're planted is how you cultivate that seed. Every grandmother, every daughter, every son, every mother, every uncle, every boyfriend or girlfriend, every spouse, anybody who has ever died. John 12:24. John 12:24. I want you to always remember this scripture, because this is what matters in your life. And Jesus spoke this, talking about his life going into the ground as a seed, and that he was simply a seed for the generations to come. Most assuredly, I say unto you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much grain. So everything that your life is about, if your life is about hatred, I got news for you. When you go into the ground, that's what you're producing. Because everybody who's holding on to something because they've never had forgiveness from you or for you, hatred, I hate hearing his name. I can't stand, don't mention him. We've got people in here who regret the time lost when others talk about their fathers. I didn't have that. And that was just a replication of the hate that he walked in. So you have to make the decision that when you put listen, if you're farming or if you're putting plants in your backyard, you understand this. If you're putting the seed in the ground, in the topsoil, making sure that it's in the perfect place, you know what that seed is. You're not just putting anything in there. Oh, well, we'll just see what comes out. We'll see. Well, what do you want it to be? I'd love for it to be green tomatoes. But what did it say on? I don't know. It's just, we'll see. So your life is a seed that needs a hurricane, that needs changing, shifting winds, that needs warmer water over here and colder water over here, that when they collide, they create a whole new catastrophe that you can't get a handle on until it's all said and done to see what's going on. But here's the thing about catastrophes. See, we call them acts of God, but really they're acts of man. This is the reason why. Because seasons always come and seasons always go. We always know that there's going to be tornadoes during this time, right? We expect between June 1st and November 1st that there are going to be hurricanes, right? So is it the hurricane's problem that it came? Or is it that it's your problem that you didn't prepare? Now, there are things, don't get me wrong, there are things that you just can't prepare for. There's a woman who had an issue of blood. She hit puberty. And her periods began to come consecutively. How do you prepare for that? 14 years old. Let's bring it into modern day times. 14 years old. And they're coming consecutively. 3 in 1 month. Only 1 week off. Until finally the doctor at the age of 15 tells her, here, you need to be on birth control. They'll regulate it and make it normal. But what she's been hearing from this point moving forward is that because of this, because birth control stops you from having babies, right? That's what it says that it's going to do. Is that it keeps you from getting pregnant before the time that you want to get pregnant. But you need to be on this for the rest of your life in order to regulate this. So in layman's terms, I'm telling you, you'll never be able to have kids. From the age of 15 all the way to the age of 29, this is what's been in her mind. This is what she's known as her reality. And her family's bought into it. And it's hard for them to shake because it's what the doctors have said. And then there comes a moment in her life where she steps up and she reaches. And she says, if I could just touch the hem, I don't even need to touch his shoulder. I don't even need to let him know that it was me necessarily. In order for the healing to come, I don't need him to embrace me. I don't need him to lay his hands on me. I don't need anything but for me to recognize the authority that's in him. And if I can get in the proximity of him, then everything changes. That was my wife. At age 29, we sat in a service just like this one. And Pastor Joel spoke from the pulpit. And she grabbed onto something and she believed. And that day, when she went home, she made the decision and she said, I'm coming off birth control. I believe God healed me. And only months later, after our conversation, and we talked about this, she's coming to me. Hey, Daddy. February 14th. February 14th, we went to our first appointment. This was our Valentine's date. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, went to go and see the sonogram of the baby and everything, or I don't even think they would do that early. But got blood work, and Monday came, the weekend, I teach this message and about hurricanes and your life shifting and everything around you being chaotic, but it being for your harvest. And Tuesday, we find out that we are not going to be able to carry this child. And my wife is trying not to lose it. And I'm trying to be strong because that's what men are supposed to do. And we're both in this inner turmoil. And the child is passed. But God spoke. And he said, every life is a seed. That's the only way I can stand up here right now. Is because every life is a seed. And my child, who was 5 weeks old, is a seed for the child that's in her womb right now. 4 months. 3 days. And we deliver in January 11th unless the baby want to come a little bit early, I ain't mad. Just not too early. But my God is faithful to do exceedingly, abundantly, above all that you could ever ask or think. So every hurricane that you've ever entered into, every hurricane, every tornado that takes you and whips you around, what's your preparation? What are you going to do to make sure your harvest comes? Because this isn't just God's job. He promised you every season there will be a season that will come around for an opportunity for you. But how do you prepare is the question. If your life is a seed, if every hurricane, if every catastrophe is meant for your good, is meant to prep the ground of your harvest, what will you do? Father God, I thank you for these people that are in this atmosphere. God, I thank you for the hearts that have submitted through every torment, through every hardship, through every loss, who have asked you time and time again, God, why? God, I don't understand it. It makes no sense to me. It's not fair. Ease their hearts. Speak to their spirit. And bring their harvest today, God. Bring the harvest in their lives, God. Lord, we know that you're faithful and just to do it. Let us not be weary in doing well, for in due season, if we do not faint, we will reap a great harvest. In Jesus' name.